Operation Christmas Child is a project of the Christian international relief organization Samaritan's Purse, and it's the world's largest Christmas project of its kind. The mission of Operation Christmas Child is to demonstrate God's love in a tangible way to children in need around the world and to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Delivered into the hands of children through local churches, every shoebox gift is an opportunity to share about Jesus Christ and God's love. Since 1993, Operation Christmas Child has collected and delivered more than 188 million gift-filled shoeboxes to children in more than 170 countries and territories, and this year hopes to collect enough shoeboxes to reach another 10 million children. Will you join Operation Christmas Child this season by packing shoebox gifts or building shoebox gifts online? Anyone can pack a shoebox: individuals, families, churches, students, and even groups. And packing a shoebox is a great way to teach kids about thankfulness and giving back to those in need. During National Collection Week on November 15th through 22nd, shoeboxes will be collected across the country at nearly 5,000 drop-off locations. Visit SamaritansPurse.org/OCC to learn how to pack a shoebox or build one online. The other side of the road is safe, where we sidestep being bothered and avoid getting involved. But rolling up your sleeves and boldly going where few dare to tread, that's walking through Samaria. Each week on our podcast, we introduce you to the special few who walk in the spirit of the Good Samaritan. On behalf of the Giving Company and your hosts, David Hendrickson and Dan Riveros, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. I'm your host, Dan Riveros, with my co-host,
David Hendrickson.
How's it going, man?
Hey, good to see you.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. When you and I are in the podcast recording room without masks on.
I like it.
Just doing it. So you know what I learned?
What happened?
You probably knew this. You're the safest person on the planet. Somebody who got COVID.
Yeah.
So I guess everybody's now sort of confessing that it's better than the vaccine.
2 weeks ago, I was sick, man.
Yeah?
I was sick. It was like a...
Do you think you got hit up again?
You know, I treated it like I did. I stayed away from everyone.
Yeah.
But it was just like a really nasty congestion. Taste and smell was fine.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No headaches, no fever, but it was congested and low energy levels. So, wow. I don't know. I mean...
Did you ever get the flu? Just the normal flu?
I mean, I've been sick, so it's like that doesn't go away, right? We still have that. So,
right, yeah.
So it could have been that. But
I never got the flu.
You never got the flu?
I was never a flu getter. I got the flu shot maybe 2 different times when my company sponsored like a wellness day or whatever. And
I know for college we had to get like we had to get a bunch of shots to go to college.
Really?
And then, when we went to Ethiopia, we got like the works. So
yeah, we did. Yeah, we totally did.
A lot of chemicals in here. But we got a special guest today, man. Who do we got?
have a very special guest, Max McLean. Welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast.
Thank you very much.
Well, so kind of a famous person that we got on, Dan. I mean, actor, producer, founder of the Fellowship for Performing Arts in New York. We're going to talk about movies today. We're going to talk about the arts as maybe something that Good Samaritans can embrace. So this is going to be a really fun conversation. And there's a pretty exciting movie coming out in early November that our audience will recognize the name for. So, Max, this is going to be a lot of fun. If you don't mind, I'm going to read your bio to our listeners, and we are going to dive right in. You good with that?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Max McLean is an award-winning actor and founder and artistic director of New York City-based Fellowship for Performing Arts. We're going to refer to that as FPA. FPA produces theater and film from a Christian worldview meant to engage diverse audiences. FPA produced and Max stars in the upcoming film, The Most Reluctant Convert, The Untold Story of C.S. Lewis. It premieres nationwide on November 3rd. Recent FPA productions in New York City include The Screwtape Letters, The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis on Stage, The Most Reluctant Convert. Each was either adapted for the stage or written by Max McLean. Other New York productions include Paradise Lost, Shadowlands, A Man for All Seasons, and Martin Luther on Trial. Many of these productions have toured at major venues across the country and have been seen by nearly 1 million people. As an actor, Max created the roles of Screwtape in New York, in London, and on the national tour, C.S. Lewis in The Most Reluctant Convert in New York and on the national tour, and Mark in Mark's Gospel, for which he received a Jeff Award, Chicago Theater's highest honor. Max's work has been cited in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, CNN, The Guardian, and the Boston Globe, among many others. His narration of the Listener's Bible, published by HarperCollins and Biblica, has received 4 Audie Award nominations from the Audio Publishers Association. Max McLean, again, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. It is so great to have you.
Well, delighted to be with you.
So this is going to be super fun, Max, and you've got to be crazy busy if the movie is coming out on November 3rd. We're recording this in early October. By the time this releases, this will be just a few days away. Before we talk about your work in film and theater and we talk about The Most Reluctant Convert, can we maybe get a little bit of insight about kind of little Max growing up? What was your life like growing up as a kid?
Well, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Panama, came to America when I was 4.
Nice.
West Side passenger ship terminal in New York City. In fact, the apartment that I live in New York City now is a 10-minute walk from when I disembarked back in 1957.
Yeah,
so
nice.
Kind of a big loop. My first experience was Statue of Liberty, New York Harbor, and coming in. I was born in Panama. My dad was a soldier, married my mom, brought us both to the States. First thing I had to do was master the English language.
Yeah.
Been working on it ever since.
Sounds pretty good.
And how old were you when you came over here?
I was 4.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. I'm also an immigrant. I came from Colombia when I was 2.
Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, and we both had non-Hispanic names.
Yeah. My parents knew. They planned ahead. They wanted me to have a really simple name. They didn't give me any middle name, nothing like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Very cool. So when did the passion for acting come along?
Well, that was much later. In high school, I was more of an athlete, football, basketball, track.
All right.
I did... one of my favorite classes in college was a dramas literature course, and we were encouraged to go see local productions and write reviews. The prof that taught it really enjoyed my reviews. So, in my mind, if I had discretionary income later in life, that perhaps some of it would be used to go to the theater. But the actual bug didn't bite until my senior year. I was on a pre-law track, and the professor taught a little seminar Socratically, meaning asking a lot of questions, and I was really intimidated. So the whole semester he hadn't heard my voice. Towards the end of the semester, he asked a question, and a lot of hands went up, and he said, "No, I'd like to hear Mr. McLean." And I turned red, I turned blue. I had, really, I was freaking out, and he had pity on me and turned to somebody else who, put together about 9 sentences of prose and answered his question. So I knew I had a problem, and it's actually a diagnosed problem. It's called sociophobia, the fear of being in front of people. So I went to the weird part of campus and took an oral interpretation class, and that's when the bug bit.
Wow. That's amazing.
So does the fear make a difference on the size of the crowd for you?
Well, not now. All it makes a difference is I'm always wanting to be prepared. Because it doesn't come back too often, but there's the memories of it come back, and I think part of that had to do with being an immigrant, and trying to fit in, that sort of thing. No, now, as long as I know what I'm doing, I feel okay.
I know David probably can't relate to this. He's a great public speaker. I feel much more comfortable in front of a huge crowd than a smaller crowd.
I think I'm probably the same way.
Right?
I think I'm probably the same way. Yeah. Yeah. And Max, it probably goes to your point of being prepared. When I'm speaking in front of a large group of people, it's been prepared and rehearsed and rehearsed again and all those things. So Max, has your whole life been in New York?
Well, I went to drama school in London.
Oh, okay.
Dad was military, so we travel all over the world.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and but my whole adult life has been in the New York metro area.
Okay, outstanding. So can you give us a little bit of insight into your faith journey?
Adult convert in my 20s.
There you go.
I was how do I put this? I was in Germany at the time, and I was really interested in this girl, and she went to church on Sunday. So if I wanted to be with her on Sunday morning, I'd have to go to church.
Not an uncommon story, I must state, right? Anyway, please continue.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it was interesting, most of it went over my head, but I do recall the liturgy included the Lord's Prayer, and I remember being halted by that. There was something, I knew it, and it reached a pretty deep place, unbeknownst to me. Then some people at the church. This was when I was in Germany. Dad was stationed there, and this is a little English-speaking Baptist church, and there was a lot of expats there.
Yeah.
And one of them, really interesting guy. What I liked about it, they were smart. They were engaging without being pushy. But one of them found out I had a history degree, and it was really interesting. He suggested to me that Jesus was a person in history, just like Lincoln, just like George Washington.
Right.
Well, that was news. That was news to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I thought Jesus was fairy tales. And the Lord used that little comment to kind of awaken the reality of Christ. And so, you never know what's going to trigger a moment, and he was faithful, and he said that. And that began the journey to reading the gospel. I read John's gospel in one sitting. I've tried to read it before. And this time, Jesus just came right out of the pages.
Wow.
He was the archetypal hero, where the worst possible thing happened to the best possible person. And I was so moved that I knew this story was more than meaningful. I knew it was true. And God revealed himself. Before I had no idea that I was loved. I had no idea that there was evil in the world. And both those two ideas emerged immediately. So it was a pretty radical conversion.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
And you stayed in acting and...
I originally had the desire to become an actor, and then when I came to faith in Christ, I felt like God was giving me a message. So somehow those two things would be interlinked.
That's fantastic. So how did that manifest itself in the founding of Fellowship for Performing Arts?
Well, obviously, that's a long story, but it did begin in that period. I went to drama school in London. I mean, first of all, not growing up in the evangelical church, I didn't get the memo that Christians weren't supposed to be actors. So,
good for you. There you go.
So, and all the while, I was in London seeing great theater, great text, great literature, really amazing stories. And it just occurred to me that a lot of these stories had embedded in them, and some elements of Christian themes, maybe not emphasized, but they were there. And so it just stayed with me that why not theater of this quality, this caliber, being produced from a Christian worldview. So the germ of the idea happened way back then, and then over the course of time, I decided to invest in the idea, and thankfully the Lord put people around me who were willing to walk with me, and it's been a long road, but that's where we are.
That's awesome. You don't usually hear about before we started recording, I mentioned to you that my wife is an artist as well. She danced for Hubbard Street Dance Company, now Hubbard Street Dance Chicago in Chicago. And we really enjoyed being immersed in the artistic community in a big city, much like you are with acting and producing in New York. But you don't often hear of organizations that are immersed in the arts, but also promoting a Christian worldview. Can you talk about how that? Obviously, that was what was going on in your heart. That was what was going on in your life. But how did that? How does that sort of wind up being the mission of an organization like FPA?
Well, I think any artistic expression is an outgrowth of what's in your heart. You know, we're a product of what we think, what we read, and who we meet and who we talk to. And so those things shape us. And then if you're shaped by the gospel, then obviously there's a desire and a requirement to express it in some way. And of course, the challenge with the arts is how you do it, because you want to influence, you want to engage in inquiry. You want to engage the imagination.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we haven't earned the right to speak. And so the arts, when it engages the imagination, and what I mean by that is, the imagination serves up the raw material of what we think about. And if an idea or a thought doesn't capture the imagination, it's pretty hard for it to, engage in any kind of self-evaluation or change. So the idea of the arts is to stimulate that. In many ways, it's sort of the missing link in some cases. Particularly for a certain kind of person, an educated person, artistic person, a literary person, they feel like they don't want to be sold. So it's an opportunity to engage the imagination, give people a little bit of space, but allow the Holy Spirit to do His work.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, we're gonna transition from the life of Max McLean for a second to the life of C.S. Lewis. You've done a lot with C.S. Lewis, it seems like. So we're going to dive into kind of the appeal of him as a character, historical figure, et cetera. But before we transition, Dan and I want to ask you some of the very typical, actor, theater kinds of questions. So we're just going to rattle a couple off really quickly for our audience to hear from you.
Okay.
So, do you like producing or acting more?
Do I like producing or acting more? I think, I started as an actor and went into production only because I wanted to produce what I wanted to act, because nobody was doing it. So I felt if I was going to do it, I had to produce it. But acting in some ways is a young person's game. So producing becomes a little bit easier in the sense of the physical demands of it as you get older. Although now that we're moving into film, that does help. I do have an entrepreneurial streak in me, so the production side does satisfy that. So I like the balance between the two. Yeah.
I'm going to give you the Matthew Broderick question: film or theater?
Yeah, they're different. Yeah, they're different. As I said, theater is much more of a young person's game. You've got to, just to give an example, the film that we've just done, The Most Reluctant Convert, began as a play.
Okay.
And so the play ran, we ran for 15 weeks in New York. We had, well over 100 performances. And what you do in the theater is you take a script and you rehearse it for 4 to 6 weeks from beginning to end. And then, every night you tell that story from beginning to end. And it can be pretty exhausting. With film, you break it up into 100 different pieces, and You jumble it up and do this piece then and that piece then, depending on what the schedule is for the locations that you need. You also have much more of a visual impact. The imprint of theater is the voice. The imprint of film is the visual.
Ah, gotcha.
And so those two things, I think the marriage of the two is fantastic.
That's great.
It's interesting because film is moving more and more away from text and almost
right. That's right. Yeah.
Just focusing on the visual. Yeah.
All right, last one. Do you have a favorite role from your history as an actor, like one that just stands out?
I like playing C.S. Lewis.
There you go. I figured that would be the answer.
Yeah.
So let's talk about C.S. Lewis for a second.
Yeah.
I learned this as I was researching the movie, and you all were gracious enough to provide some materials there, and I watched the trailer. It does look like it is going to be a fantastic event on November the 3rd. I think most people associate C.S. Lewis with the Chronicles of Narnia. Mm-hmm. And yet, his writings are extensive. What do you? I think I learned in the materials you sent that C.S. Lewis has sold over 250 million books.
Wow. Yeah.
What do you think is unique, compelling about the life and writings of C.S. Lewis that has put him at that scale?
Yeah. Boy, I wish I knew. But it's interesting. Before his conversion, he was converted at 32 years old. To full Christianity, and before that, he said his ambition in life was to be a writer, not just to be a writer, but to be known as a writer. And he said, I'd failed. At my age, Keats and Shelley were dead. Byron and Chesterton had completed their most distinguished works, and all he had done was publish 2 very thin volumes of poetry that no one read. But after his full conversion to Christianity, the literary flow that came from his imagination and mind did not cease until the day he died. And it was so varied. Works of great scholarship, fantasy, as we talked about, literary criticism, apologetics, just poured forth from that fertile brain of his. So the uniqueness of Lewis is his commitment to Christ. He said something that's it sounds really basic, but it's really rather profound. He said somewhere, a believed idea feels different than an idea that's not believed. He says, I believe that there is but one God and that Jesus Christ is his only Son. I believe in prayer, in the second coming, in heaven and in hell. God, judgment, heaven and hell. And of course, his focus is there's 2 worlds. There's the world we live in and the world to come. And the world to come shows itself. We've kind of been duped. He says we've been intoxicated, and we need a very strong spell to break the spell of worldliness that's just overcome all of us. And so he writes with that perspective. Beyond that, he read everything from the Greeks to the moderns and had a steel-trapped mind that he could recall it all, and had this incredible poetic and ability to write just wonderful, write and speak wonderful prose and speech. So, given those gifts that he had and his commitment to Christ, that's a very rare combination.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you didn't know about C.S. Lewis that you learned or was new to you as part of doing the Most Reluctant Convert?
Oh, I would say there was a lot. I mean, first of all, I had to dig a lot deeper than you would. Anytime you're going to do something for the stage, you really have to get underneath it, look for motivation, etc. But he was a huge personality, and really quite a proud man. And he really knew he was the smartest guy in the room.
That must be nice, right? That must be nice.
And he said he enjoyed verbal battle. And he could be very wicked with it. He said he loved it was the pleasure of using the English language forcibly. But he also knew that his pride was going to ruin him. And so he really, that scripture, humble yourself, he took that to task, that he really wanted to press on toward the goal to win the prize to which God had called him heavenward. He really wanted to work out his salvation in fear and trembling, knowing that it's God that works in him. So all of this, in one sense, broke him, but also through that brokenness, he became very funny. I think he was always, his father was a great storyteller. But his humor just comes out. And that comes from a very self-deprecating place that makes him, first of all, you wonder, wow, this guy's a bit much. And he's a huge personality. But then you see how the Lord has broke him, and that's really affirming.
That's awesome. So one of the things that I picked up, and please make sure I don't get this wrong, so correct anything that I might say that's incorrect, but it seemed as though I think in the trailer it says that he lost his faith at age 14 or ceased being a Christian at age 14, and then you mentioned the adult conversion, which you all have in common at age 32 for him specifically. Dan and I are talking through this podcast about how Christians can live out the gospel in the shadow or the spotlight of the Good Samaritan parable in Luke chapter 10. Is there any takeaway for all of us as believers, as followers of Christ, from the life of C.S. Lewis about how tragedy can really shake your faith, your foundation, and maybe there's a sensitivity or an inclusion that we should take on to maybe people who have fallen away or non-believers or whatever it might be because of some of those tragic experiences?
Boy, that's a good question. Lewis lost his mother when he was 8, maybe 9. He had a terrible relationship with his father. He was in the trenches of World War I. Where he said it's the hell where youth and laughter go, the brutality that he saw. And he came out of that experience with the conclusion either there's no God behind the universe, a God who's indifferent to good and evil, or worse, an evil God. And so it's from that vantage point that he, that was the nadir. And then from there, he began the reevaluation process. And originally, it was intellectual in the sense that, he asked a really good question. I'm trying to frame it in my mind. If the universe is, if the universe is crooked, if nature's line is, if the universe is crooked, why do we complain? Why do we complain about it? Because the only way you can know if something is crooked is if there's a straight line to compare it with. And, if the universe has no meaning, we would never know it has no meaning. So he was going for meaning. He was going for higher purpose. He was going for something beyond the here and now, because by earthly standards, he had become very successful. He said he was becoming complacent, and so the idea of you are not your own. He recognized that if God exists, that he owed his allegiance to him. And that's when he said, I gave in, and and admitted that God is God.
Wow.
The most reluctant, dejected convert in all England.
Yeah.
Because he knew, he fought it. He didn't want it. He didn't want to believe it. And then all of a sudden, God redeemed his life and made him this, the most influential Christian of the 20th century. That was his story. And I think a lot of it is, when you read the Screw Tape Letters, when you read The Great Divorce, he's so transparent about his own failings.
Yeah.
The Screw Tape Letters is about his own battles with temptation. The Great Divorce is about his own resistance to the Holy Spirit. So both of those, and we learn so much from him. I'm not sure how directly it has to do with the Good Samaritan, although he would have. He tells a very funny story that somebody screamed at him once, not screamed at him, but, chastised him, because he gave money away very freely. And somebody asked him, why'd you give that man money? He'll probably just go and drink it. And Lewis said, well, if I kept it, I'd go and drink it.
There you go. That's good.
That's awesome.
Well, let's transition to specifically the movie for a second.
Yeah. What do you hope people experience when they see it?
Well, you're going to, everything we've talked about today, you're going to experience the real Lewis, his warts and all. You're going to see how Christ captured his imagination. I think especially if you're, a literary person, an academic person, you tend to dismiss these things as sort of emotional crutches. Lewis never felt that people say sometimes that, I wish Christianity were true, because it's too good to be true. And he goes, my experience with Christianity, I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want to have somebody telling me that I owe my life to them, that there's nothing in the deepest recesses of my thoughts that I could say, keep out. This is my business. He didn't want that. And so I think it's going to take people to places they haven't been before in a very spiritual, and I think the catharsis that emerges. I mean, for some people, it's going to maybe upset them, piss them off, but others.
That's good art, right? That's good art.
Well, art is meant to be provocative.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, I think we're starting to get a feel for what this movie is going to look like, and I'm sure our listeners are getting super excited about the opportunity to see it. Max, would you mind letting them know what's going to happen on November 3rd? How can they go see the movie?
Well, first of all, they can go find out more about it, see the trailer that you referenced at cslewismovie.com. I think we're in 300 plus theaters around the country.
That's great.
They're actually adding a lot more. I'm pleased to say ticket sales are going really fast.
I'll bet.
So we're really pleased by that. It's right now, it's a one night only, November 3rd. But I've noticed like some theaters in places, well, all over the country, they're having 5 showings that day. So we're really encouraged, and we hope people will come look it up, go to cslewismovie.com and check out the trailer and see how close it is to your neighborhood.
Outstanding. November 3rd. That is the day.
Mark your calendars.
There it is. So how about Fellowship for Performing Arts and Max McLean? If people want to learn more about FPA, if they want to find you online, how might that happen?
Sure. We go by FPA Theater. But an easier one might be cslewisonstage.com.
Nice.
cslewisonstage.com. Right now we have a national tour of The Great Divorce. This weekend we're in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know this will be aired a couple of weeks later. But the fall tour includes where do we start? Colorado Springs, Kansas City, LA, San Francisco, Phoenix, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Grand Rapids, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and Cleveland.
Wow.
So we're getting around this fall, and we have tours of Screwtape Letters coming up. The theatrical version of The Most Reluctant Convert plays at colleges and universities around the country. So we get around. So you can find out more at cslewisonstage.com.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
Max, this has just been a delightful conversation, and I want to give you the last word, if you don't mind. As I mentioned previously, this is a podcast that Dan and I put together after we had just an incredible experience in Ethiopia, and we saw the collaboration. I dare say, Dan, the love between Christian and Muslim leaders in Ethiopia as they were serving kids in that country under very difficult circumstances. And we dove into the parable of Luke chapter 10 and how Jesus, as a Jew, made a Samaritan the hero of the story. And at the time, Jews and Samaritans were at odds with one another religiously, culturally, politically, all those things, socially, economically. And so I think Jesus painted a picture many times throughout the gospel, the woman at the well, whatever it might be, of Christians not using their faith as a barrier, right? As an opportunity to engage people that are not like themselves. And because of this conversation, because of my wife's career, other experiences, I just feel like the arts represent one of those platforms that can bring people together who might have different perspectives, and I think you write, that FPA produces theater and film from a Christian worldview meant to engage diverse audiences. Mm-hmm. And then you think about the diversity in the arts themselves: music, film, writing, storytelling, painting. All these things move people, and you said so well earlier on in this discussion that art comes from the heart.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And it's reflective of the heart. I worry sometimes that maybe Christians, and of course we run the Dove site, Dan, that provides critique of movies from a parental perspective, and sometimes we give them the red X. But can we talk about how the arts are good, right? And the arts are from God, and maybe believers ought to think about the arts as a way to actually advance the gospel and include people like FPA talks about from a diverse perspective, as opposed to thinking about the arts as having these barriers or these lines that shouldn't be crossed.
Sure. Wow. That's a big ask.
Go get them. Yeah, a long tee up, but I think you've got some wisdom for us.
The way you set it up, though, in terms of how Jesus platformed the Samaritan, the power of the arts is to tell stories, and stories. God is the great storyteller. Stories tend to expose our needs. Yeah. It also exposes our pride. It has the ability to, that's what the Good Samaritan story did. And it was pretty shocking at that time. People didn't like it.
Right.
It was really provocative. But it was like, the first step that we had to reread that story. And we had to read that it is, maybe our prejudices need to be broken down. So I do think that anytime we do anything that approaches what the Good Samaritan story is leading us to do in any art, in any form, whether it be business, engineering, arts, law, medicine, the some are. Yeah. I think we're doing Christ's work.
That's good. That's
Very good.
Well, to all of our listeners, this has been an incredible conversation with Max McLean. He is an award-winning actor and the founder and artistic director of Fellowship for Performing Arts in New York City. And FPA produced, and Max stars in the upcoming film, The Most Reluctant Convert, The Untold Story of C.S. Lewis, which is going to be in theaters all around the country on November the 3rd. So please make sure you go see it. Max, this has just been a delight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, David, Daniel, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, man. All right. You heard it here. Walking Through Samaria podcast. I'm your host, Dan Riveros, and my co-host,
David Henriksen.
Man, thank you so much for coming on today, Max.
It was awesome having you, Max. Thank you so much. To everybody out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
For more content like this, visit us at givingcompany.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Walking Through Samaria.